Gettysburg Seminary presents the Seminary Explores podcast. Conversations on faith, art, people, politics, theology, life, and more, with voices from around the corner and around the globe.
Syria is serious business. Hello, I'm Jerry Christensen, and this is the Seminary Explorers. I'm going to ask Dennis Carter today, what are the major issues in Syria, and how can we be better informed about the situation? Dennis Carter is a 39-year official of the Foreign Service Department. He spent 23 of those as an active on-duty Foreign Service officer, and 14 years now in retirement. They seem to make some of you guys busier in your retirement than you were when you were active. He has served in Jordan and in Paris. He has served in Jerusalem, and he has served in the Caribbean and Grenada. And we're happy to have him here today. I think we better start with the refugee crisis. That's the one that's the issue that concerns Americans most right now. It's the one we feel most directly because of actions by 2 or 3 dozen governors, and now by the House of Representatives.
Well, thank you, Jerry. It's nice to be here with you. Yes, I think the most important issue facing Syria today and Syrian citizens is the refugee crisis, which has displaced probably a third of the population.
That much?
There are some numbers here, and I have to dig through these papers. It's had an incredibly disastrous effect on the Syrian population, with a government bombing its own people, people who have found themselves in opposition to a dictatorship. Sometimes that opposition is based on ethnic or religious differences. Some of it grew up out of the Arab Spring of several years back. But all of it has produced a refugee crisis really unparalleled since the 1948 partition in Israel.
When we talk about a crisis like this, a movement of populations, don't refugee populations usually stay closer to home than they are this time? Isn't this different in some way from anything since the one you just referred to?
Well, I think that's largely correct. In many Civil War situations that we've seen during my career in Africa, sometimes in Asia, you see largely the population sheltering either in a safe haven in country or in a neighboring country. In the African context, yeah, that's largely put unsustainable burdens on whatever area or government is hosting those refugees. And that's where the UN and private voluntary organizations and non-governmental organizations really step in and do a lot of heavy lifting. In the first Gulf War in the early 90s, I was posted in Jordan, and I saw firsthand Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, working with refugee populations running out of Kuwait after the Iraqi occupation. This happened to be on the border of Jordan. But those organizations, I have the highest respect for those private voluntary organizations who really put themselves in the line of fire, as we saw just a few weeks ago in Afghanistan, where an errant bombing run hit a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan.
As these refugees pour out of Syria, they seem to be a mixed bag. There are other people who seem to be joining in that exodus.
Well, it's really a chaotic situation defined by the patchwork of ethnic groups and religious groups within Syria, and defined by the government's, bomb them all. Any sort of opposition is labeled terrorist by Bashar al-Assad, and also by their newfound Russian allies. And some of that is very chilling and very concerning to the U.S. government, should be concerning to the rest of the world as well.
As they move out of Syria and into Greece and up the eastern part of Europe and into Germany, and even come to the United States, There's been considerable reaction, especially here in the U.S., I mentioned at the top of the show.
Well, there's been a reaction in the U.S., yes, but the thrust of that exodus has largely gone through Turkey. I've seen some of the refugee camps in Jordan. The Jordanians are hosting probably 500,000 Syrians. Wow. And that's a huge burden on a developing country. And again, I've seen the Jordanian response in previous incidences of refugee flows, and they are very good at it, and they do their best, and they do a pretty fair job, I'd say.
I shouldn't have generalized then. Are you saying that the United States reaction, or the reaction of some in the United States, stands out for its negative response?
Oh, I think you're seeing the same kinds of reaction in Europe, and I hate to categorize it, but political parties in Europe, Marine Le Pen and the National Front, have sort of staked their claim to their segment of the electorate in France based on an anti-immigrant attitude. This sort of a crisis just feeds into that. And I think you're going to see more of that in more places. The Hungarian government has a right-wing aspect to it, and they're reacting very negatively. I think even though the German government and the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has been very welcoming, she's being forced to walk some of that back by public concern in her own country.
There was a letter recently in the Washington Post signed by a number of distinguished Americans that cautioned us against what may be called a kind of paranoia about...
That's right, and it actually was just...
I hope my word wasn't too strong. I said paranoia, but...
No, I think the letter was directed at congressional leaders by national security experts to counteract what appears now, even in the view of most congressmen, to have been a hasty decision just before Thanksgiving. There was a piece of legislation that was rushed through the Congress literally without hearings and without time to really consider the ramifications. That piece of legislation purported to clamp down on security clearances and basically set up extremely high hurdles and some would say roadblocks to admitting any large numbers of Syrian refugees. I have some numbers here for the number of refugees who have been admitted
to the United States.
To the United States since in fiscal year 15, we admitted 1,682 refugees. Vulnerable refugees. The president has announced his intention to admit up as many as 10,000 and potentially more in FY16. And the legislation that passed through the Congress against a threatened veto by the president, which hasn't happened yet. I don't know that the House of Representatives have passed it.
Yeah, it's not even got to the Senate.
I don't believe the Senate has passed it, and it may very well die there.
Just die there over the holidays, right?
Over the holidays. But if it were to be passed by the Senate, the president has assured the nation that he would veto it. That piece of legislation, again, was hastily conceived, hastily passed. No opportunity for debate, no opportunity for amendments. It was one of the first things that the new Speaker of the House pushed through the House in contravention of his pledge of better transparency. But then the reaction in the United States has been, in some quarters, extreme to say, oh, we don't want any Syrian refugees at all. They're a security risk. And what the public doesn't understand is there are really substantial security background checks and vetting that goes on. And the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security has full discretion to deny admission to any refugee up until the point of admission, should anything appear not to be as it should in a refugee's background. And a refugee coming to be resettled in another country usually goes through UN, I don't know the name of the organization, a UN organization, and this has happened in my experience in Southeast Asia after the Vietnam War, and in Serbia as well, and we've resettled numbers of people from Afghanistan and Iraq who had assisted U.S. forces as translators and were in physical danger, and some of whom have been killed in place before they could be resettled. So there are national security reasons and moral reasons that the United States should go forward with its policy of being welcoming and accommodating to those that have served our government.
Dennis Carter is Dennis Carter is a Foreign Service officer with the U.S. Department of State since 1978. He continues to serve in his retirement, as many of our Foreign Service officers do. We've talked about Syria so far and its refugee crisis. Let's turn now, Dennis, to ISIS. Why the crisis with ISIS?
Well, ISIS is really a new sort of actor on the international scene. There's a terrific book that Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, wrote about a year and a half ago called World Order. And his thesis is that the relationships and the operations of diplomacy and commerce and everything else between nations was largely set up in a system after the Treaty of Westphalia in the 17th century. ISIS and its cohort of religious fanatics really rejects the secular state that grew out of that, what Kissinger calls the Westphalian system. ISIS, those folks, I really would explain it as ISIS versus the secular state.
Right.
We really don't speak the same language literally, culturally, or religiously. And when I say we, Western Europe, United States, the Western world doesn't speak the same language, doesn't have the same culture or religious outlook. And that makes the radical Islamists and ISIS really deny the legitimacy of the secular state. In their view, the state and religion are sort of intertwined, and you look at countries like Saudi Arabia, where it's a monarchy and quasi-theocracy. You look at ISIS and what they call their caliphate, it really is a theocracy. And in our view, they've perverted the tenets of Islam, and in the view of many Muslims, Muslims of my acquaintance, they're perverting the view of Islam, and that brings up a whole different question. How does the Islamic faith police its own apostates?
Good question.
Sometimes they kill them.
Elimination is an interesting possibility. The differences between the Shias and the Sunnis, big deal? The Sunnis view themselves as not Orthodox in the Christian sense, but they view themselves as Orthodox with a small o. They're the mainline branch of Islam. The Sunnis the Sunnis are in Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. The Shias, Iran is a 95% Shia nation. There are pockets of Shia in Lebanon and Syria, and then there are the Shia sort of offshoots. The Alawites are an important ethnic group in Syria, about 10% of the population, maybe 13%. And the Alawite grouping is where Bashar al-Assad and his father. So the Alawites are the
religious minority that's controlled Syria for the last 50 years, and the military institutions as well.
So numbers don't count there. It's who has the power in hand. Yeah. The difference between the two is long-standing, but it's hard to get one's mind around it. Is it mainly cultural now? At one time, it was that the Shia said that they had, when you mentioned the word caliphate, that they could trace their lineage back to Muhammad, or at least to Muhammad's son-in-law, where the Sunnis said that was not important, the faith itself. Or is that just overstating the case?
I don't know. I think it's largely it's sectarian.
It's now sectarian.
It is sectarian. The Shia are viewed by the mainstream Sunnis. The Shia are viewed as heretics. Mm-hmm. So when you remember what happened in the Middle Ages with heretics in Christendom, that the Sunnis would be just as happy. Now you interpose on a geopolitical sphere the fact that Iran and its growing power and its nuclear ambitions threaten the Sunni mainstream. You have seen 10 or 15 years of war in Iraq, which is 40% Sunni, or maybe a few fewer than that now, and majority Shia.
It's such a close balance that when the tinder was lit, the civil war was...
It has never been a close balance in power.
Not in power, sorry.
That's changed.
We do that in Central Africa too. It's been changed around, but that was Central Africa for a while, and between the Houthi and the Tutu. Talking about the geopolitical sphere, let me ask about the role of Russia before we draw this to a close. Why are they so interested in Syria?
Well,
they meaning Putin, probably.
Well, the Russian state, if you think about geopolitics back a century or more, the goal of the Russian state has always been a warm water port. They've got, and they have had, warm water ports on the Black Sea. But one of the reasons they're closely allied with Serbians is because they're fellow Slavs. Yeah. They've always had a strong interest in Greece, and they've always had an enemy in Turkey. Mm-hmm. The Turks have worked it out, and with this latest shoot-down of a plane by a Turkish Air Force F-16, the Turks are actually making conciliatory gestures now. They wanted to meet with Putin this week. They have offered to talk about it. They've expressed, although they haven't expressed an apology, they've expressed regret over the loss of life of the Russian pilot. But the Russian state goal has always been a warm water port and potentially control of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles.
Right. That's the Crimean situation of a year ago.
That goes back a century and a half.
Yes.
Some good and bad movies have been made about that.
But Syria is a warm water port, so do they have facilities?
They have an air base in Latakia, and they have a small naval base in Tartus on the Syrian coast.
So they are very much interested in Syria, not just for...
Well, it's been their one ally in the Middle East, and they're likely to want to keep that ally.
Can they afford to keep it up?
It's very expensive right now. The Russians are running an air war that we estimate, the United States government estimates they're spending $2 to $4 million a day to run that air war. The Russian strategy seems to mirror, according to an editorial page writer in the Washington Post that I read a week or two ago, or maybe a month ago, the Russian outlook and goals in Syria. This writer purported to their behavior in Chechnya, where they basically went in and started killing everybody that was anti-Russian and got control of the Chechen state with a proxy proxy Chechen in charge. Their proxy in Syria is Bashar al-Assad. The Assad government and the Russian president are labeling everybody who's against Bashar al-Assad as a terrorist. Whether that's the moderate opposition that the United States supports or anybody else who's fighting against the Assad regime, including ISIS.
Will any of the recent developments, such as the shooting down of a plane in Turkey or the shooting down of a Russian plane in Egypt, are you at all optimistic that there might be some kind of breakthrough here in the near future?
Well, yes. In the last few days, there's been an agreement to solve the presidential crisis in Lebanon, and that's a microcosm of what can go on in the larger Middle East context. If all the religious organizations and sects in Lebanon can finally agree to some sort of lowest common denominator, sharing of power or parceling out of power, political influence, then the hope exists. I would also add that Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia have met several times over the last several weeks. President Obama and President Putin have also met recently. With the intersection of the Paris attacks and now the attack in San Bernardino, I think that's ratcheted up the temperature again. But there are conversations going on that can lead to some hope. May. There's a lot of caveats and conditions in that. It's a pessimistic outlook for the Syrian people until those conversations actually produce some progress.
Syria is serious business. Our topic today with Dennis F. Carter, a career Foreign Service officer with the United States Department of State for something like 39 years. I'm Jerry Christensen. You've been listening to the Seminary Explorers. Have a very good day.
You have been listening to the Seminary Explorers from historic Seminary Ridge in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a production of Gettysburg Seminary. We invite you to visit our website at www.ltsg.edu. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Gettysburg Seminary or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.